Hey, welcome everybody. I'm Ted Earhart, and we are literally just days out from the 2020 presidential election. So I thought this would be a fun time to talk about the age-old debate about whether or not the stock market does better under Republican administrations or Democratic administrations. People love to talk about this. It's really just kind of more for fun than anything. But I'm going to give you some things to think about here, and you'll be able to add to the conversation or the debate next time you're having it, perhaps over the holiday season in the coming weeks and months. So you can see all the presidents going back to the World War II era and the associated stock market returns during their respective presidencies. So, does the president's party matter? Does the stock market do better under Republicans or Democrats? Well, you can somewhat judge for yourself. In my opinion, what matters more than anything when it comes to how the stock market does under any respective president is really just kind of the sheer luck of timing. The timing of when a president takes office and when a president leaves office. And a lot of this has to do with the business cycle and the associated stock market cycle that tends to go along with that. We can really see it vividly in the most recent presidents, going back to the early 1990s with Bill Clinton. Remember what was going on in the early 1990s? We had the Gulf War. You know, the Iraqis invaded Kuwait. That created an oil price shock, which ultimately contributed to a recession here in the United States. Now, as it relates to the stock market, you can hardly tell based on this chart, but this little blip down here represents a roughly 20% decline top to bottom for stock prices. So my point is, you know, we had a recession in the early 1990s, and that is a major factor in why George H.W. Bush lost the election in 1992. That set Bill Clinton up exceptionally well from a timing perspective. He took office in 93, just at the beginning of a new business cycle and what ended up being the greatest stock market boom in American history. And Clinton further got lucky by leaving office just as the market was peaking out in the year 2000. That, of course, set George W. Bush up for perhaps the most unlucky presidency in history, at least as it relates to the stock market. I mean, you just think about this. George W. Bush took office in January of 2001. So stock prices had peaked the previous March. But we went on, of course, in 2001, we had the September 11th events, which contributed to a recession during that period. But the stock market bubble of the late 1990s was already kind of unraveling. And top to bottom, we saw a 50% decline. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear that George W. Bush didn't have much to do with the stock market bubble bursting. It was just purely the luck of timing of when he took office, or should I say the unluckiness of when he took office. The stock market did recover later in his second term, but then, of course, Bush got unlucky again with the onset of the real estate market downturn and the great financial crisis, which accompanied one of the great stock market busts in American history. Bush ultimately left office in January of 2009, which was basically at just about the absolute trough of the stock market. So totally unlucky for George W. Bush as it relates to the stock market. But that poor luck obviously set up Barack Obama quite well because he took office basically at the trough when George W. Bush left. So he was able to ride the economic recovery and the stock market recovery throughout his 2 terms in office. So if we go back to our opening slide here, you know, does it really matter which party is in the White House? Well, again, my opinion is absolutely not. What really drives these numbers more than anything is just the luck of when these various presidents have taken office in the business and the stock market cycle. In fact, here's one other thing I'll throw at you. If we include Franklin Delano Roosevelt on this chart, go back to 1942, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was at about 100 at that point in time, right kind of when the Americans were starting to get drawn into the war. Well, where is the Dow today? Well, as I'm recording this, the Dow is trading at roughly 26,500. So that's a 265 fold change. And if we include FDR, guess what? There's been 7 Democrats in the White House and 7 Republicans in the White House since 1942. So if you've wanted to make investment decisions based on who's in the White House, chances are you've probably done more to harm your portfolio than help it. Your best bet as an investor is to be politically agnostic, because it really hasn't mattered throughout the course of history who's in the White House. What at the end of the day matters the most is the success of the businesses that the stock market ultimately represents. So I think that's probably a good way to end. I'd be curious to know if you want to leave me a comment if you were aware of any of these figures, or if you were aware of the fact that since World War II, there's been 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans, and the Dow has gone from, again, 100 up to 26,500. I'd be curious if anybody is aware of that. So I appreciate you tuning in, and make sure you get out and vote next Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.